Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Rocket Chiro Podcast, the business and marketing podcast for chiropractors. My name's Jerry. I'm your host. I am in mourning. I am experiencing sadness and small amounts of depression because of the football games this weekend. Those of you that know, I am a Buffalo Bills fan. I'm not a bandwagon Buffalo Bills fan. I am an OG for the Bills Mafia. I have been a Bills fan since I was a little kid. And I've suffered through many years. And I also suffered through the horrific 13 seconds at the end of the game. This weekend that I don't even know what to say. If you want my opinion on it, not that you guys listen to the podcast to get my opinion about football, but my opinion is this. Although Patrick Mahomes is an incredible quarterback and obviously you got to make throws, that 13 seconds, 90% of it was terrible defensive strategy on the Bills' part, and 10% of it was Patrick Mahomes, because I think that anybody could have made those throws given the fact that they weren't actually covering anybody. So that's my opinion. I'm not as upset about the overtime rules because they are what they are. Just sucks. Anyway, so I was watching football, and I bring that up because, one, it's on my mind. It breaks my heart. I just, whatever. I'm going to talk about what I want to. The other part of it is, as I was watching the football game, I started noticing that this thing that does happen a lot in sports where the defense, they'll start talking about the defense getting tired or the defense getting gassed. And I never played football competitively. I, played with the kids in the neighborhood and stuff like that, pick up, no pad football. Like we did that when I was a kid. But I did play basketball, my whole childhood and into high school. And even with basketball, playing defense is so much harder than playing offense. Like it's exhausting. And it got me thinking about just the dynamic of like why that is. And part of it is, if we're just going to be honest about it, part of it is it's more fun to play offense than defense. It's more fun to score than it is to try to keep people from scoring, at least for most people. But I don't really know that that's it. And the reason that I wanted to talk about this on the podcast is because there are chiropractors, a lot of times they're just exhausted. And I'm going to bring up two really big reasons. And sometimes I feel like a broken record. Like I say a lot of the same stuff over and over again. But the problem is that you guys, I think oftentimes overlook some of the little things that are going to make the biggest difference in your life and the biggest difference in your practice. And one of the things I think about a lot, because the demographic of people that I work with most often who are chiropractors are people who are a little bit overwhelmed. They are trying to grow. They're trying to improve their situation. They're trying to get more patients. They're trying to improve their income. They're just overall, they're trying to claw up to a level that they've never been before. That's most often who I work with. And having walked through that myself as a chiropractor, getting out of school, feeling like I had a certain level of readiness, I guess, however ready you can possibly be when you get out of chiropractic college, and starting my own practice, and then really getting overwhelmed with the feeling of being over my head and the feeling of it just feels like it's too much. And I think sometimes you will start focusing, like you start off focusing on the wrong thing, where you'll start focusing on, if I just got a little bit better at adjusting, or if I get a little bit better at telling the story of chiropractic or whatever, that's going to be the difference. But I don't think personally that that's really the big thing. So I'm going to talk about two things. And one of them I thought about with football, and I guess both of them apply to a sports setting. So those of you who've played sports might be able to relate to this a little bit better. But when I was thinking about the whole defense versus offensive thing, and trying to figure out like, why is it that it's so much more taxing physically? Because they don't typically talk about, the offense has been out there so much, they're exhausted. That's not ever the conversation that goes on. I mean, I don't know that I've ever even thought about that before. With playing basketball and stuff, it's not like, oh, they've had a lot of possessions, they've scored a lot of points, I'll bet they're tired. No one says that. And so why is it that playing defense is so much harder or so much exhausting than playing offense? And I think part of the reason is because when you're on defense, you're reacting. And this is going to come up to one of my things that I think there's a parallel to you guys as chiropractors, is that if you are living your practice life or life in general, and you are reacting to everything instead of being proactive. Because the thing about the offense is the offense knows what they're doing. They know what they're going to do. They know the direction they're going. They know when they're going to cut, when they're going to not cut. The running back knows if it's a passing play. There's a knowledge and a proactivity to what they're doing. Now, that doesn't mean that defense is out there just being like, oh, I don't know what we're doing. I mean, the Bills were the last 13 seconds of that game. But for the most part, they're not out there with their thumbs in their nose saying like they have no idea what they're doing. They have a plan. But that plan is dependent upon what the offense does. You can't just say we're going to do our defense and it doesn't matter what you do. You can do that from an offensive standpoint. I mean, if you're talented enough and you're good enough, you could just decide what you're going to do and it doesn't really matter. And to a certain extent, if an offense runs into a defense that is better prepared, more talented, whatever, then they have to respond, and that can cause stress to them. But the thing that I just was thinking about as I was looking at this and I'm listening to this and I'm thinking about sports and thinking about when I played sports, and I'm going, I think that's part of it. Part of it is when you're on defense, like from a basketball standpoint, like you're down into a crouch, you're kind of looking out of the corner of your eyes as you're watching the person in front of you. It's so important that you're moving your feet quick. It's so important that you're moving your body and your hands properly. It's exhausting and it requires so much focus and so much energy. And you just have to be able to react so quickly, because the person who's got the ball they're going to make the first move. You have to respond. And so when you're in practice, one of the ways that you can minimize your like exhausted level, the tired level, that kind of like, oh my gosh, like I can't keep doing this. It's too much. I'm overwhelmed, whatever. Part of the way that you can do that is by having a plan and start to be more proactive about all the things you're doing. I mean, if you go to even something as simple as a community event or a screening or something like that, or even if you're not doing a screening, you just have an information table or whatever. If you go to that with a plan, here's what we're going to talk to people about. We're going to get people to sign up for our newsletter. We're going to get people to like us on Instagram. We're going to give some stuff away. We're going to do a posture screening, whatever it is you're going to do. This is how we're going to try to get people to, here's how we're going to identify people that are going to potentially schedule an appointment. This is how we're going to schedule them. Like, you have a plan. Now, I realize that the life has a way of grenading your plans, but the reality is, if you go into any situation with a plan and you start executing that plan, it is a general rule, it's going to be less taxing on you mentally and emotionally, because you're not going to have that like, what do I do? What do I do? What do I do? And you're just reacting to what's around you. It's exhausting to practice that way. And so many chiropractors, when they first get started, because they don't know what they're doing, and whether you started your own practice or you're working for someone else, many of you, even if you're working for somebody else, you're not properly trained, because oftentimes the doctor you're working for is not properly trained. They don't have a method to their madness. So many chiropractors who don't know what they're doing, who are kind of struggling a little bit on their own, but they have enough space and they have enough momentum to bring somebody in. They bring someone in, but they're not even qualified to tell that person how to do a good job. And they'll hire someone with very little pay. Most of it's going to be incentive based, because it basically minimizes the risk for the hiring chiropractor. And somebody comes in, and then if they do a good job, great. If they don't do a good job, it's not that big of a deal to the main doc, because they don't have a lot of skin in it. That's how you kind of know that the person you're working for is not real confident in their ability to train staff and their ability to actually expand their business, is because they don't put a lot of skin in the game. Like it's all on you. And if that's the case, there's nothing wrong with that. Just be an independent contractor. Like don't be an employee under those circumstances. That's silly. Maybe I shouldn't make a blank statement, but for the most part, that's kind of silly. But the idea is that whether it's answering the phone, a new patient, your regular patient, like what with your notes, your insurance, all the stuff that you're doing in your practice, and there's so much stuff that you have to know, you have to learn, you have to get familiar with. And obviously you can keep it super simple. You could do a cash practice, you could do a solo micro practice, do it cash. Like you keep it as simple as possible. And I think that's one way of doing it. You could blow it all out and have, physical therapist and massage therapist and multidisciplinary clinician and clinician clinic, whatever, with tons of insurance, tons of patients, multiple locations. You could do that as well. Obviously, the more elaborate multiple location, multidisciplinary thing requires a completely different level of planning and preparation and proactivity than what, micro practice by yourself cash would require. But the same principles that are going to make a really successful micro practice are going to be the same principles that are making this mega practice. They just are. The only difference is that you could get away with running a micro practice on the sloppy side, and it may not be as stressful. It wouldn't be as stressful and devastating as if you tried to run an actual business that way. Because if you really tried to run if you bought a clinic from someone that there was multiple locations and multiple doctors, multiple everything, and you don't know what you're doing, that's going to be a nightmare, and you're just going to ruin it really fast. And this is one of those things that kind of goes back to, there's a lot of talk about fairness and a lot of talk about equity and trying to make everything the same for everyone. And the reason that concept's really silly is because if we just level the playing field for everyone within a really short amount of time, there's going to be people who are doing well now are going to be doing well, 5 years and 10 years down the road. And the people who are struggling now, most of them, not all, but most of them are going to be struggling down the road. And that's because it's often not necessarily the opportunity that you've been given so much as the character, the discipline, the proactivity, the structure. These are things that are not sexy. You know what I mean? Like these aren't the things that sell seminars. Like if you're going to go pay $1,000 or $3,000 for a coaching program, you don't want someone to say, you should have a budget and you should have structure and go to bed at the same time every night. You know what I mean? Like those are not the things that people pay high dollar for, but those are the foundational things that you can have a really awesome, successful micro practice, and you can have a really awesome, successful multi-location, multidisciplinary practice. So, the lesson from the one of the football lessons or one of the sport lessons from this weekend is that being reactive is more exhausting. It's more taxing on you than being proactive. So I want to encourage you as many places as possible, go into your week, go into your marketing, go into your month, your year, whatever, with as much structure and with as much intention and with as much proactivity as possible. If you don't know what to do, then put yourself in an environment where you can start learning. That could be reading books. Obviously, there's something like Next Step. I talk about Next Step all the time on the podcast, where there's a bunch of video trainings that are in there to help you get a really good understanding of how to run a small business, how to set up your practice, how to better communicate with your patients, how to do recommendations, and how to do some things in a way that's not salesy, not gimmicky, but just understanding some of the structure things that aren't sexy, but they are really, really important if you not only want to be successful, but you want to be successful without all the stress. Because that's also a kind of a crappy place to end up, where let's say that by just pure talent, you're a really gifted person and just you're really good at the hustle and the grind and everything else, and you don't take my advice. You're not being proactive. You don't like structure. You think it's confining. And by just sheer will and talent, you drag yourself to the place where you're just doing awesome. there's no possible way that you get there and you're not exhausted relative to what you would be if you had a little bit more structure in your life, a little bit more proactivity and less flying by the seat of your pants. And being someone who my natural instinct is to fly by the seat of my pants, I prefer it. I've shown up to many a test thinking, I know enough. It isn't ever going to be the place that is the lowest stress and the highest achieving place, even if you're super talented. The other thing I want to talk about is competence, because this is also something that's very exhausting, and this is true for sports as well. You could be the most prepared person in the world, but if you're incompetent, let's just say you're not a baller, like you're someone's better than you. It sucks. It's exhausting. It's exhausting and terrible and not fun. I've played, when I was growing up, I grew up in the 80s and we weren't given participation trophies. If you sucked, you either didn't make the team or you sat on the bench. I spent a lot of time on the bench until I got into kind of the last couple years of junior high, and then I was doing really well in high school as far as basketball goes. But there were a lot of years that I just didn't play that much. I sat and watched. I went to practice, worked hard, but because I stink and I'm sitting on the bench and I'm not as good as I could be, if I got around people that were better, on some level, it's like, yeah, I like seeing people that are better than me. I like the challenge. But after a while, you're just kind of done with it. Initially, it's like, yeah, I like the challenge. I'm going to take this guy on. I'm going to win. And then when you realize that you're just getting pounded, I mean, just ruthlessly pounded because you are just way overmatched, it's just not fun. And I think that one of the other things, and these are the kind of the combo things I'm talking about today, is one is being reactive instead of proactive. But the other thing that I want to talk about is just your competence level. And I kind of hinted at this initially when I was saying that I think a lot of chiropractors will focus on their clinical competency. And I think you should. You want to be good. We have to deliver as chiropractors. We have a very performance-based career. I was talking to a chiropractor the other day, and he brought on, did I say brung on? No, he brought on an associate, and he was telling me about this associate, and he was saying that she was great. Everything you could possibly want in an associate, other than her adjusting skills weren't that great. And I was like, well, that you can get better at that. Like, that's not, just, you should be practicing. I used to practice. Like I took a sports approach to learning how to adjust. I used to put like a towel over like a dry spine. I'd have a dry spine and a table in my basement. I used to put a real thick towel around it and just get my hands in the positions I wanted to and practice, and it's obviously lockout's weird when there's no, muscles and ligaments. It's just dry spine. But the point was, I want to go through the motion. I want to go through the motion of making that twitch move with my arms and with my hands and get my hands used to doing certain things. And obviously the more bodies you get your hands on, the better you're going to be. But if you really want to be good at adjusting, there are things you can do besides crack a bunch of eggs in practice that can improve your hand speed and improve your thrust and improve the things that we do as chiropractors. But we have a very performance-based job. You got to be able to deliver. And if you're not competent at that, you really should be working hard to get competent at it. But I think that most of you know that, like, that the adjusting part of what we do is something you have to be better at. Where I think chiropractors don't, or they kind of resist because they didn't go to school to be a small business owner, is the competency around small business. And if you own your own practice, that weight of feeling in over your head is not ever going to go away until you become more competent as a small business owner. It just isn't. It's like being in a game against someone who's just light years ahead of you in terms of their knowledge of the game, their skill, their execution. Even like Tom Brady. Like Tom Brady is not as good as he is now because of his physical abilities. like he's as good, and really his whole career, he's as good as he is, and he's achieved all the things that he's achieved, not because he's the most talented chiropractor that's ever lived, but because of his mind, because of his preparation, because of his competency doing the thing that he does. It's not so much about skill, it's about competency. And so I think one of the things that's super stressful, I shouldn't say I know one of the things that's super stressful for chiropractors who feel this weight constantly. And obviously having more people and making more money kind of solves one problem where like you're not worried so much about money. But if you're not competent as a small business owner and as a leader within your practice, like training your staff and doing your marketing and doing your budgeting and just setting up your business, if you're not competent with those things, making more money doesn't really make that stress go away. It changes the stress because the focus is not exclusively on money, but you still just feel overwhelmed, and you just know, like you innately know that you're in over your head. I would love for you guys, and this is one of my hearts for Next Step, and I had this conversation with a chiropractor the other day where I told him, I know that not everybody, people are not going to stay under my tutelage for years and years and years and years in most cases. That's not going to happen. What should happen is they should get a baseline amount of information to become a competent small business owner. And that should give them the foundation to take their next step, to get to their next level, and ultimately grow the type of practice they want to have. That's my heart, is that I can build a foundation, because that's what I consider myself. When I do this podcast and you guys hear me talk about the same stuff over and over again, I'm trying to build a foundation that you can build a successful practice on. I want you to have the groundwork right, the stuff that's not sexy and not interesting. You know, when you walk up to a building and you see a big towering, skyscraper and whatever, and everybody can look at it. Oh, that's amazing. We really admire that. That's awesome. Nobody's patting the guy on the back that laid the foundation. But if he didn't do his job right, it's going to come down. And that's true for your practice as well. The difference between like a building and you is you're going to feel the stress along the way as well from that shaky foundation. Like a building can't talk to you unless the creaking, and maybe it can talk to you. Maybe I'm speaking out of term. I don't know. So the two things I'm going to encourage you to do are not things you can do today. They're things you can start doing today. And I had someone ask me a long time ago, this was several years ago when I did a podcast, somebody had me on their podcast and they were asking me questions. They sent me stuff ahead of time. And one of the questions they said was, what is something that you can do today to change your practice? What's something our listeners can do today to change their practice? And my answer was nothing, unless you're going to start a new habit. Then that'll change your practice. So when I say you need to be more proactive, you need to have more structure in your life, that's something you can start today, but it's not something you're going to finish today. It's not something that by the end of the week or the end of the month, you're going to be like, oh man, I'm super glad I did this. It's probably going to be really annoying, especially if you're not 100% sure what you're doing. And in your competence, don't just focus on the practice side of things, like the adjusting side of things. You should be competent as a chiropractor. There's way too many sloppy chiropractors that are out there. Like we should all strive to be better with our hands. But you could probably be better at communicating with your patients. You could probably be better at empathy. You could probably be better at training your staff. You could probably be better at setting a budget and at managing your money and at having a better marketing plan or marketing strategy. You could probably be more competent at a lot of things, and you don't have to do them all yourself. Like, don't think that you do. You can hire people to help you with training. I've had people before, doctors that are successful and they have associates. I've had doctors pay for Next Step, like a Next Step membership, so their associates can go into it and be better trained. And they sort of used it as a supplement to the training they were doing in-house. Hey, here's some things you can learn. I trust this guy. I trust his program. I want you to study this thing and learn some stuff. I've had people do that. Now, that's not the only way to do it. You could have people come in and help. You could assign people books. You can assign people. There are ways that you can get help doing some things. You don't have to do all your marketing. Chiropractors are notoriously dislike marketing. You can get help with your website. You can get help with Google ads. You can get help with Facebook ads. You can get help with Google Business Profile, SEO, getting reviews, like all of that stuff. There's no shortage of stuff that's sold to chiropractors. The harder thing is finding someone you can trust, finding someone within budget. Those things are harder, but that's part of your responsibility. Part of your responsibility as the business owner is to find good people, to find competent people that are going to do the things that you want them to do. But if you don't even know that they need to be done, and you don't have a level of competency around even hiring people, finding people, firing people, whatever it is, it's just going to be a mess. You're going to be that person who not only is reactive in the game of life, but someone who's overwhelmed because life is just beating the tar out of you and you are ill prepared to do the thing that you are trying to do. And I think that's probably, those two things are probably the big reason why most chiropractors quit. There's what's the fallout rate? 50%, I think is what I've always heard, 50% after about 5 years. My buddy and I that we graduated together, we were talking, we went to lunch the other day and we got talking about being in school and we were trying to remember some of the people we were in class with because we couldn't even remember people's names at this point. It's been 18 years. Holy crap. It's been 18 years and, or close to 18 years. It'll be 18 years in a couple months. And, we actually drove by Logan. We didn't go inside, but we drove by Logan because we were actually right there by Logan, and kind of reminisced a little bit. And we were looking at pictures because I found that I have it somewhere. It's somewhere around here. The pictures of when I graduated and whatever, and all the different people from the class. And he had said to me, he's like, I think it would be really interesting to kind of figure out who's practicing still and who's not. Because we know certain ones we know for sure are, but there's also certain ones that we know for sure aren't. And I think that would be interesting because I do think that it's really, really common and it's not hard at all to look at even my class and go, they're out. I mean, heck, I'm out, I'm not practicing anymore. So I would throw myself in the category of not, even though I work with chiropractors, I'm not practicing, haven't practiced for 8 years now, 9 years. Holy crap. How long has it been? This will be 9 years. So it's been like 8.5 years. It's a long time. Anyway, I'll stop rambling because I think I got my point across. If you guys want help, get a hold of me. I'll be happy to help you. I can help you with some of your marketing or your website. If that kind of takes some of the stress off of you, if you're just feeling overwhelmed from a business and marketing standpoint and from a small business ownership standpoint, consider looking at Next Step. Like Next Step is a really great place to start raising your competence level, your confidence level in yourself. I really, really love when I hear from people and they say something like, thank you for, your content. I really appreciate it. I finally am feeling like I can do this. I love that because that's kind of the point, because you can do it. Like there's one of the things I tell myself when I'm trying to do stuff and I'm kind of insecure or I'm having a hard time is I tell myself there are people in this world that are a lot dumber than me and a lot less qualified that have made it happen. So I should be okay. I used to do that when I was at Logan. I would look around the class when I was having a hard time in a class. I'd be like, at least half of these people are dumber than me. So I think I'll be all right. And when it comes to chiropractic practice, I can pretty much guarantee you that there are chiropractors that are not as smart as you, that are not as good with people, don't have as much potential, that have made it work because they have more structure. They've learned the right things. They got themselves in the right situation and they became what they should have been all along, what they could have been all along. And you can do that too. It just requires work and it doesn't happen overnight. All right, guys, that's it. I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up. Thanks for listening to the podcast. Thank you for subscribing. Thank you for leaving reviews. Those of you who left reviews. I'll talk to you in the next episode. See ya.